It's Friday, and I'm back with the next in our Fanzine Friday series. Today we're taking a look at Palantir number 5 from 1982. Please stick around. I'm AZ Mountaineer, and this is our channel, Old School Rules, where we celebrate the community of old school gamers and grognards who like classic RPGs, miniatures, magazines, and everything that goes with it. Each week on the Fanzine Friday series, I take a fanzine from my collection off the shelf for a closer look. And today, that's Palantir number 5 from January of 1982. Hope you enjoyed the video. So we're continuing our look at the fanzine called Palantir. It was originally called the Palantir, and then around issue 3, they switch and drop the V. They just call it Palantir, but I've left the name consistent throughout for my videos. This one's from January of 1982. It's the Bristol and Avon Dungeons and Dragons Association. They call themselves BADA. And it's a group of folks who've joined that association, and they're all participating, although Tony Ellam seems to be the person principally responsible for the content, or at least pulling it all together. This is the fanzine. It's the size we're used to. It's slightly heavy stock cover, just plain white, and then regular paper folded in half with one staple through the middle. One of the things you'll notice about this particular issue is the word Palantir does not appear on the cover at all. It just says Test of the Gods. We'll talk about that here in just a second. And then on the back, now at the very bottom, they do tell you when the publication date was, and that is January of 1982. So let's take a look at the cover. No attribution this time, and I'm pretty sure this is not the artist who did the last two covers, just because the artistic style here is rather different and not nearly as professional, I would say, as the last couple that we've looked at. You've got this orc here on the front, and then the guy behind it. Behind him is a fighter, and we know that because when we talk about Test of the Gods, that is an adventure specifically for fighters. Let's take a look at the table of contents. You have the editorial from Tony Ellam saying, yes, this is Palantir number 5, even though you can't tell by looking at the cover. And he's encouraging people to provide feedback in articles and so forth, because I don't think they're getting much of that from the outside world, outside of their small group. They have a review of their convention, talk about. Test of the Gods, which is the adventure. This is a solo adventure for fighters. And so it's sort of set up like one of those pick-a-path books. You read a paragraph, and then to do, you do X, Y, or Z, and then you turn to a different number to see what happens next. And you'll notice it starts on page 3, and the next thing is on page 27. So we've got like 24 pages dedicated to this solo dungeon. It's almost the entire fanzine. Menagerie, a new monster. Large party encounters is for the DM to talk about having when you have large numbers of either monsters or NPCs, and how to set that up in your dungeon or wilderness encounter. DM's notebook, which are tips for the dungeon master, and then the article we've all been really waiting for, even if we didn't know we needed it, which is Sex and the Half-Breed, and we're going to talk about that. Only 3 contributors named here: Tony Ellam, Dave Brown, and Rob Malos. Okay, so let's look. Here we have Bacon 3, the Bristol and Avon Dungeons and Dragons Association, BADA, convention. Bacon, as you guys know, my favorite convention ever, at least in terms of name, right? So Bacon 3 was held in September. They upgraded the size. They say fortunately they changed the size of the room they were going to have, because they had over 250 people showed up, which is their largest convention ever. And to me, 250 people for what they've been doing sounds like a pretty impressive turnout. Lots of different events, D&D, RuneQuest, some board games, etc. A couple special things. Bob Pennington was an artist who came and painted miniatures. They had their competition dungeon, which Dave Brown and Tony Ellam designed and Rob Malos ran. So they had their winner of that event. And then sadly, they share that one of the dungeon masters that was at their convention had passed away. All right, here we've got it. Test of the Gods, the solo dungeon for 3rd level fighters. It's massive, and it's all just these pages of, number on the left-hand side, and then here's what you read for each of those numbered columns. Here's the background. Wandering around the streets of Silverhead late one night, you're arrested by a group of a dozen warriors claiming to be temple guards. Inside the complex, they take you to a small chamber, and the priest explains your arrest. You're accused of transgressing the unwritten law. Your innocence will be shown if you can emerge from the sacred labyrinth below, having faced the test of the gods. They strip you of everything, put an amulet around your neck, drop you down in a rope down a shaft into room number 1, where you're going to start this adventure. And they tell you that this small amulet will correctly identify any magic items that you find, and gives off only about 3 feet of light. just enough for you to see the monsters right before they attack you. And they talk about that, like every monster wins initiative because you can't see any, it's enough light that, you can see about to arm's length, but everything's going to get to you before you know it's coming, kind of thing. So that's not good. But it's a very, very thorough and good adventure. There's no map here either. And I've seen these sort of pick your own adventure, pick a path things in fanzines before, but they always had a map with them, even if it was not drawn up on one page, but just had each room drawn. There's no drawings here at all. And so everything's just going to be based on the description. Here's our new monster, the Shaggy or the Velu. I don't know if that's drawn from something or why it has two different names. They call it the Shaggy in here. I like it quite a bit. Only one of them appears. It's the size of a bull. From the neck up, it's sort of like a snake's head, except for it breathes fire instead of biting, or, well, it can bite, but instead of like venom or something, right? Its body's covered in essentially like porcupine quills. And if you try to attack it, you're probably going to get hit by one. And then it has a tail, and it can control of its tail can swing it around and like basically spike you with it. If you get hit by the spiky quills, if you will, you get damage and poison. And then the tail hits you, it can lash you and do damage as well. For whatever reason, the tail is its weak spot. And while it has an armor class of -4, any hit on the tail will sever it and instantly kill the monster. So I do appreciate the weak spot. You wouldn't really probably think to do that if you were in a fight with it, I don't think. And of course you wouldn't ever know about this creature until after you'd faced one and finally figured that out. But in any event, that's our new creature, the Shaggy. Like the name as well. Here he is. Great big guy, right? Covered in spiky, looks like he has more like dragon or lizard legs as well. He's a sort of crazy creature. All right, large party encounters. The essence of this article for the DM is one, plan and get organized ahead of time. And so if you're going to have monsters, he just suggests a little chart where you list everything you need to know. The armor class of each monster, the hit dice or hit points and or hit points, attacks, damage, and put all that on one piece of paper in a very concise chart. And so you can mark, as monsters get hit, lose hit points or die or whatever, you can be marking them. And not one, worst thing of all, like try to figure that out after you read the description and you're at the table and you're playing, right? He's like, you got to get that stuff all figured out ahead of time, which is absolutely correct, because it would really slow down the game and make it super boring, especially because we're talking about an encounter with 10, 20 monsters more, right? The other thing he says is you got to be realistic about the space that a monster would need. He says basically 5 by 5 square feet per individual, maybe less for children or women. But essentially, he's like, if you've got orcs, say you have 60 orcs in a cave system, you're going to have 1,500 square feet just for the orcs, usually spread out through multiple different small rooms, interconnected perhaps, but they can't all be in a 10 by 10 square room, like standing next to each other like statues. They got to have room, they got a room to fight, room to move, live. And so it's a good article, and this is the kind of, I guess, thoughtful realism that I do like. Sometimes I get a little uninterested in things where people are trying to make their game too realistic, but this one makes some sense. It's all in terms of ecology and what would make sense on how to set this thing up. The next thing is the DM's notebook, and it talks about chests. Now first I'll point out at the bottom, that's a little cartoon that goes with the article I just talked about. 73 large meanies, or monsters in this, and he stuck us in a 7 by 18 by 32 foot room and expects us to guard the treasure like we're all on top of each other. Is kind of what you're supposed to see in the drawing. The DM's Notebook by D.L. Brown is just an idea about what to do with your chests. How likely is it that a chest is trapped or hidden? And he basically said, well, what's in it would determine whether somebody would bother to lock it, trap it, or hide it. And so at the low end, with less than 10 gold pieces of value, 1 in 6 chance of being locked, not trapped, not hidden, all the way up to 49.99 GP. So 5 in 6 chance of being locked, 2 in 6 chance of being trapped, 1 in 10 chance of being hidden, and then 5,000, 1 in 6 chance of being hidden, and then 50,000, it's going to be hidden, it's going to be locked, and there's a chance it's double trapped and not just single trapped. I mean, that's a good, I don't know if you need the chart, but it's good to sort of think through that and the logic of, hey, the more valuable the stuff that's in there, the more likely it is somebody took a lot of precautions to protect it. And then the last thing is character treasure type, and characters, just saying NPCs and other characters should have stuff on their person if they're adventuring types, right? Because maybe they don't have a home base to leave their stuff behind. All right, you've been waiting for it. Here you go, sex and the half-breed. You knew you had to do math when you played Dungeons & Dragons. You may not have remembered that you were going to get involved in a biology class. But this guy goes through in a very, it's a fantasy game, but he goes through a very real-world example of genomes, gametes, chromosomes, male, female, XX, XY, and goes through and shows you the things you may remember from biology class about how you trace heredity and that kind of thing. And so then he goes into, he's got this beautiful chart with the elf and the human, just as his first example. And he goes through, here's the female's an elf and the man's a human, and here's the different combinations, all of which result in half elf, two girls, two boys, if you had 4 kids. And then he goes through, well, what happens if you, and he switches the human and the male and the female. And then he goes into, okay, what happens if you had 2 half-elf parents? And he got this interesting genetics analysis that says if you had 2 half-elves, you could combine their elven chromosome strands, and so you could get a human, a full elf, a human, or a half-elf. Right? So two combinations give you continue to give you a half elf, and then the other ones continue to give you either who I guess would chromosomally be completely a human or completely an elf. That's kind of interesting. I think I don't care for all the biology because I don't want to do biology anymore at this point in my life, but I thought that was an interesting thing to think about, and then to think about those combinations you could have in your character, and that would explain, and maybe in your campaign you're always going to be a half elf at that point, but you can have a half elf who basically looks like an elf, or a half elf who basically looks like a human, and I guess everything in between. And again, don't want to do biology, but I think it's a very smart article, clever, and worth the time to read, even if you don't spend a lot of time pondering it after. So this is a really short one because of that dungeon taking up basically 80% of the fanzine. But so that's Palantir number 5 from January of 1982. Another good fanzine put out by these guys. I think I have one more that we'll do next week. And I hope you guys have a good weekend. Hope you're subscribed. And if you have some friends who'd like our channel, please send them our way. And until next time, my friends, keep rolling 20s.